For this construction project, we're going to build a very simple interface to connect your transceiver to your computer, which will allow you to send and receive data modes such as SSTV, slow scan television, RTTY, radio teletype, FT8, and other similar sound-based digital modes.
Right, I'm joined by Jenny M6JUT, and Jenny, I think you got your foundation license a little while back, but then you've started playing a bit more with radio during the recent lockdown.
Yeah, that's right, Rob. I got it a while back, and in the lockdown, well, I managed to get my partner into radio too, and he got his foundation license, and I got myself a radio receiver, a little SDI USB dongle, and had a look to see what I could see. And now I'm borrowing a friend's FT818 transceiver.
Excellent. So you've done a little bit of receiving, a few voice QSOs. Have you ever used a computer to actually make a QSO and have a data modes QSO?
No, I haven't. I've played around with, I think, SDR Sharp. That was just receiving radio and having a look around. But no, I'd be interested in trying to make a QSO with the computer. That would be cool.
Cool. So we'll need to do a little bit of building first, and then we'll connect the radio up to the computer, and we'll see if we can have an FT8 QSO on 2 meters between us. We're probably about 10 miles apart or so, so it should work. So let's get the soldering iron out and have a go at building the interface. Okay, so if you have a look in your radio manual, it'll probably be under something like digital mode operating, and you should find the pinout of the connectors that we're going to use to connect your radio to your computer.
Yes, so on the back there's a pin with data written on it, which is the middle one of the three, that one. So that's what we're connecting it to, is it?
That's exactly what we're doing. So if you have a look in the manual, it should show you which pins are connected to which signals. And we're looking for probably 3 pins here. We're looking for a ground, and then we're looking for audio coming out of the radio and also audio going back into the radio.
This one here. So that's what we're making today.
That's exactly what we're making. So we've got data out, which is going to be the audio coming out of the radio, and data in, which is where it's going to go back in. So on your computer sound card, you've probably got a line in or a microphone in, and a line out or a headphone out socket. We'll connect to that using little 3.5mm jack plugs. Now, you can either solder wires directly between each of the plugs that we're going to use here, or a quick way of getting going is if you get some cables which have a plug at both ends, you can cut them in half, and then we'll use a bit of Vero board or strip board to make the connections between them. So we're going to connect all of the ground or shield wires together, then we'll connect the audio out from the radio to the tip of the audio in or line in plug into the computer. We'll connect the audio into the radio to the tip of the line out plug from the computer. So if you can just strip off the outer insulation from that audio cable, please. You should have either 2 if it's a mono plug or 3 cables inside. Yep, so you can strip a little bit of the insulation off of each of those wires. So a lot of radios use these little 6-pin mini DIN plugs. These can be really tricky to solder yourself. So again, a great way of getting one of these on a bit of cable already is to buy a double-ended one of these cables and cut it in half.
And do the same again with this one?
Exactly the same again. You're just going to strip off that outer jacket, and you'll probably find 6 wires inside. Okay, so now we're going to find out which pin on the plug connects to which color conductor in the cable. So we'll use a multimeter for that, and you can either use it on the continuity setting if it has one. That'll normally beep when the 2 probes are connected together, or you can have it on the resistance range. And at the moment, with the probes separate, it's showing an infinite resistance, and if I connect the probes together, it'll go to 0 or something close to 0. It doesn't matter if it's exactly 0 ohms. Okay, so we need to figure out which of the pins on this connector needs to connect to which of the pins on our little mini jacks that are going to plug into the computer. So you have what's called the pin out of the connector, and that's which pin is connected to which signal. On this connector here, we want to find out which of these pins, the ground one, connects to which color of the wire. So we're going to take our multimeter leads and put one lead on this ground pin, that's the third one round as we look at it. And then we're going to look at those 6 bits of wire coming out and find out which of those is connected to that third pin round. Now, it can be a little bit tricky to hold the multimeter probe on one end while you hold it, also get the other probe and put it on the other end. But with a little bit of practice, it's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, you've got all your connections?
Yes.
Now, while you've got the meter out, what you probably want to do is to do the same measurements on that little mini jack cable that you've got. So if you have your mini jacks, you can cut the end off there or strip the end off of the wire there, and you want to see which wire is connected to that outer, that's called the shield, and then also which one's connected to the tip here. Now, you might find that your cable has 3 connections instead of 2. That's okay, that just means it's a stereo cable. We don't need to worry about that middle connection, that's the ring. So you can ignore the ring, you just want the tip and the shield. Now, the best way to solder these wires into the Vero board is, before we put the wires into the holes, we're going to tin them first. So get your soldering iron, and you want to heat up each wire and just apply a small amount of solder to the wire. You're going for the wire rather than the soldering iron. And again, just a small amount. You don't want too much heat or the insulation will tend to melt back, and you don't want too much solder, so you don't want any blobs on the end. So the best place to start now is probably to get your 6-pin mini tin cable, and we're going to solder that onto the Vero board to start with. So if you put one of those wires through each of the holes in different rows, so you don't want them going into holes in the same row, it doesn't matter too much which order they're in. So if you put one wire through and then put the Vero board down on the desk to hold the wire in place, and then solder that first wire in. Again, you're just going to apply enough solder to make a good connection, but you don't want to overflow onto the adjacent tracks. So you should end up with 3 ends of the wire pushed through and then soldered. Cool. So we've got our first connections on. Now we want to connect the screen from the headphone cable and the microphone cable onto the ground connection of our data jack. So you're going to this time work along the same row. So I'm going to take that cable that we found that was the screen and put it into another hole on the same row. So that's poking through just there, a little bit tricky to see. And I'm going to solder that on. So that'll connect those 2 together.
Okay.
That's great. So you've now got all of the ground signals connected together. You now want to pick one of your mini jack cables. That's going to be the audio out of the computer into the radio. And you're going to connect the tip of that one onto the data in pin, which I think was red on your cable. So you're going to connect the wire that was the tip on one of your mini jacks up to the red one going into the radio connector.
So if that was from the data in, that's like line out on the computer, is that right?
Yep, that's exactly right. So it's audio coming out of the computer and going into the radio.
Right. I'm going to put some tape on the line out thing. So I know which one it is. Line out. And then I take it, I put the data out pin connected to the other jack plug.
That's exactly right. Yes. So that's going to be the audio coming out of the radio and going into your computer.
Can this can't damage your computer, right?
We're only sending audio signals down here, so it should all be fine. If you are worried, then you can get an isolated interface. And that means rather than just connecting the two cables together like we are here, you can instead put a little audio transformer in between the two. And that will completely electrically separate those two halves. And you'll find if you go and buy one of these interfaces from a shop, often they will have those transformers in the middle. And that can just give you a little bit more separation, especially if you've got some RF coming back down onto the outside of your radio chassis. Great, so that should be all that you need to do in terms of soldering that interface up. And now you're ready to actually connect your radio to your computer, and we'll see if we can get some signals going in and out.
Great, thank you.
We need to connect up our interface to the radio. Now, if your computer has a line in and a microphone in socket already, you can just plug those mini jacks straight into your computer. But if it doesn't, a lot of laptops nowadays don't have a separate microphone plug. You can buy a very cheap USB sound card, and you can get those for less than £10 in most online stores. So whichever is more convenient for you on your computer. And you want to plug in the microphone plug, the headphone plug, and then hopefully that little 6-pin mini DIN will plug into the back of your radio. Okay, can you still hear static coming out the radio?
No, and when we plugged it in, the static stopped coming out the radio.
Ah, have you still got a green light, or is it red light?
It's still green,
green light, yeah.
but it's not playing out the computer speakers.
No, that's expected. If you adjust that squelch knob, that's the outer. Oh no, you've still got a green light. Why is that?
Yeah.
So the volume knob's doing nothing at the moment, is that correct?
As soon as you plug in the digital cable, the radio ceases to make noise.
I'm going to suggest it might be my soldering.
I don't know how it can be. Great, so if you load up the WSJT-X application, we'll set that up and point it at the right sound cards and set your call sign up. Great, so if you go to the File menu and then Settings, great, so you need to tell it what your call sign is and also where you are, where your station is. So we normally use the grid square or your locator square, which for you will be JO02. So you can pop your call sign into the My Call box and JO02 into the locator or into My Grid. Great. Now, if you head over to the Audio tab, this is where we're going to tell it which sound card to use, because if your computer has more than one sound card, you'll need to tell it which one's connected to your radio.
That's right?
Yep, that's perfect, and the same for the output.
I guess it's this one.
Great. Now, if you press OK, that should all take effect. Cool. So if you turn your radio on, if you haven't already.
Yeah, it is on.
Perfect. And we want it on the 818, it uses the dig mode for digital modes. And we want to be on a frequency for 2 meters FT8 of 144.174, 144.174 megahertz. Cool. So we now need to choose what mode we want to operate in. WSJTX does lots of different digital modes, but one that's really popular is FT8. And if you go to the mode menu, then there's an option under there that says FT8. So if you choose that, that's great. So you can now see down at the bottom left-hand corner of the window, there's the little pink thing saying FT8, and that shows you which mode you're running at the moment. As well as the main window up at the top there, you've also got the waterfall on spectrum down at the bottom, and that's showing you time going downwards and audio frequency going across. So at the moment, you can sort of see frequencies between sort of 100 hertz and about 600 or 700. If you make that window a bit wider, you'll see everything that you can hear coming out of your radio at the same time. That's perfect. We've got our transmit audio connected up, and you should definitely check your radio manual to make sure that your levels are correct. Generally speaking, this means looking at the ALC meter and adjusting your output level so that you get very little movement on the ALC meter. But yeah, this should all be okay for this demo. So I'm going to call CQ, and you should see my call sign and grid square appear in the band activity window on the left. So I'll enable that now, and in a few seconds, you should start seeing a decode of me. We work in these 15-second periods, so it might take 30 seconds for that to come through. Once you see a station that you want to work calling CQ, if you double click on their call sign in that band activity on the left, it'll automatically generate our standard QSO messages. And you can see these down in the bottom right of the window. So for example, message, the first message will be you calling me M0 VFC from M6JUT. After that, you'd expect to receive a report from me. This wouldn't be a 5 and 9 like you would use in voice, but instead it's a signal to noise ratio, so something like +10 or -5. After that, you'd send me my report, I'd acknowledge it, and then we'd say 73 to each other both ways. So that's the sort of flow that these QSOs take. So once you've got a decode of my CQ call, which you can see there, if you double click on it and then press the Enable TX button, and what that's going to do is to start the software automatically responding to me and working through that sequence of messages.
Should I go for the bottom one or the top one?
Any of them should be fine.
Right. Okay.
Yep, and then click the Enable TX button just up, and that's the one. Yep, perfect.
Right, and that's going to go through these.
Yep, so that will go through them, and if it will only progress to the next one if it hears the decode that it expects from me. So it won't start giving me my report until I come back to your call, for example. Sometimes, these messages, you might have to send each message a couple of times before the other station decodes it or before you decode their reply. That's great. So you've sent your first response, and in fact, I received it here as well. So I'm now sending my first message back to you, which is going to be M6JUT, M0VFC +29. That's giving you a signal report of +29 dB signal to noise ratio. That's a really strong signal. If we weren't so close together, it would be much less, and it could be into negative numbers as well. As you can see, without you having to do anything, you've automatically then sent me a report of R +15. So you've acknowledged my report to you. That's the R, and you're now sending my report to me. I've responded and I've sent RRR. That means, yep, thank you very much. I've got my report from you. That means you know that you've got my report. I know that I've got your report, and we can both say 73 to each other. And once it's completed that sequence, you'll notice that the Enable TX button, that's no longer lit up red. So you've just gone back into receive mode. And that's it. That's the QSO complete. It's also worth bearing in mind, if you do want to explore all of these different modes, all of the hardware that you've got is ready to do that. You don't need a different interface. You don't need a different radio. All you need to do is to either, if it's one of the JT family of modes like FT8 is, just go to that mode menu and choose the mode that you're interested in. Or if it's something different like PSK31, download a different bit of software, something like FLDigi or MMTTY, and then you'll be all ready to go on that mode. You don't need to change any of the connections to the computer.